recording on the computer. Hooray for my side. And yet, and still, man, this is not like sticking to the Bristol board down here. So I'm getting a lot of it going on the Bristol board and coming off. Hi, I don't want you guys freaking out or anything. I thought that my icebreaker for the morning while you guys were coming in and getting kind of settled would be to actually get started on a new project. So I thought I would just get myself started with the new project so that by the time this dries and we've talked about some other things, we can get back to it. So I'm neutralizing a little bit of an edge of a great big swath of yellow that I put on there with some violet. And I don't really want it to be terribly neutral. I don't really want it to be awfully brown. I just need it to be a kind of a neutralized area of yellow, because this is the beginning of the next project. You know, it's always nice to have the beginning of the next project right there. So I got a little neutralized yellow up there. I got a little neutralized violet down here. I got a big piece of yellow on one side. I got a big piece of violet on the other side. I think I'm gonna let that dry, because what I'm gonna do for our next project is ask you guys to do something like this. We're gonna pick a color complement pair. Gonna throw down some paint on a piece of Bristol board, and these don't have to be your final shapes that you're going to work with, because what I'm going to ask you to do is actually take a scissors when this is all dry and cut yourself out some kind of an interesting shape out of the violet, and cut yourself out some kind of an interesting shape out of the yellow. And then we're going to compose in a collage where we can move our shapes around, and we can play with overlapping the shapes in different ways and doing it in different orientations in space, trying to make as interesting a composition as possible. So we're going to do that later on today. I thought I would get this started and then put it off to the side so that we could engage on other stuff. What other stuff are we going to engage on? Well, I did this. I can't remember with you guys if you guys were getting the one that I was working on in orange and blue or yellow and violet. So let's just look at them both for the sake of jazz. I've done 2 demonstrations with the 2 classes. And so this is where we want to be when you're all done with this. You can see that by my edges and everything, it's not perfect. I haven't been completely, perfectly, I don't know, anal retentive, staying inside the lines, whatever. I was getting a little painterly on this stuff to show you guys that you could possibly do a little wet in wet mixing if you were trying to fix things on the fly, because as you saw, I would throw down my full spectrum intensity color in the square that it was supposed to go into, and then mix in a little white to neutralize it and make a tint of it so that it would correspond to the next spot up on the value scale, and then throw more white into it, a lot more white, to try to make a whitish version of the color so that it would correspond to the white square on the value scale. And then, of course, adding black to create tints so that they are corresponding to the spots, the steps on my value scale. So it's really important to execute a value scale, first of all, that has nice incremental value changes from black to medium gray all the way up to white, and do a double check on it to make sure that your squares have incremental changes to them, so that the step from one square to the next square isn't so big that that means the steps between these squares are very small and insignificant, and I can't tell the difference in value between these 2 squares. Guess what? Right now, I can't really tell the difference between these 2 squares. These 2 squares seem to have a really big value difference. I would like to come in and go higher key with this value, and then maybe a little teeny bit higher key with this value, so that I can get nice incremental value changes in these top 4 squares, and still try to get to a medium gray in the middle square here, and then try to get, again, incremental value changes from middle gray down to black, which is always difficult, like with these last two, because they want to be really close too. So spending some time on your value scale is really important, because that'll set you up for success on the two color value scales that we have to build on either side of it. Because I really want us to keep working on these two value scales until we get good incremental value change in all of these squares, going from a white orange, and I don't think this one is white enough. I want to throw a little bit more white on top of that so that it is white and it only has just the hint, the most, hint of orange in it. This is kind of a peach color right now. I mean, this is a light peach, but it could be a hell of a lot more whiter. And then this one could be a little whiter too. This is our full spectrum intensity color here. So all I probably need to do is put another coat of orange on top of this to make this a stronger orange, because I really want these two oranges to be strong and to be able to, hold the day. And then stepping off of this orange might be just a little too dark, which sets me up for failure down here. So I might have to lighten this orange up and, try to get me to where I've got good incremental value changes, even in my deepest values right before I get to orange black. Orange is the new black. And then everything I said for this goes for the blue too. I'm probably too dark with my white blue. I probably need to throw a bunch more white on this and then watch my incremental value changes, because I'm really trying to get them so that I can see the difference between the value changes and that they correspond and will read across between, the two color columns and the black and white column. So that's what I wanted to do. Now, you guys, this is due this weekend or something. Maybe it's due today. I can't remember. Might have a due date for today, and then I'm still accepting them without any penalty for several more days. So you've got through the weekend to do this. And so I'd like you to do one of these and get it done, get it photographed, and get it uploaded. I'm going to take a breath and ask if there's any questions out there. And somehow I'm even going to give you guys time to ask that question. So anybody having any trouble with this or have any questions about it? I've still got copies of this thing, so you can come over and get yourself a copy if you need a replacement copy or something. This document is available electronically. It's attached to the coursework, to the assignment, so that you can download and print this out yourself if you have cardstock. And there are no questions. But I'm always worried that I'm not giving you enough time to ask a question or formulate a question. So I'm going to give just a little bit more time, because that's what I'm supposed to do before I lunge into the next thing. Because I thought today was going to kind of go like this. And this is about the most boring thing that you can actually do a group critique on, because, oh my God, there's nothing more eye-rolling, eye glazing over and boring than, looking at 20 of these things, one for each student, and trying to go through what each student did, with this in front of everybody else, especially when they're all so close. So I'm just asking you guys to really redouble your efforts on this and make sure that you're doing the blending and trying to get the nice incremental changes in value and color and intensity up here across the top that I'm looking for. If you can understand what I'm asking for and read my mind, that would be great. In the meantime, I wanted to try to demo this new project here. So I'm going to try to dry it out a little bit, and maybe I can do this. Do I have one of these? I do. I sort of do. Let me change my camera angle to the bird's eye view again. And I'm going to go get a couple of these that I played with. Okay, before. it turns out that there's only going to be one. So don't get too excited. So back in the day, like 4 months ago, there were magazines, there were fashion magazines out there like Vogue and Mademoiselle and whatever, and they were in business and they were publishing. Suddenly, at Christmas time and in January, they went out of business, or at least that's what they said, and they are not publishing anymore because some of my projects had to deal with color. And I was asking you guys to use the magazines as a source material to find big color shapes that you could use. Color shapes kind of based on close-ups of products or fashion, fashion accessories like shoes and purses and stuff, or that kind of thing. And the idea was to cut out a great big shape in one particular color so you could play with it against another particular color. This is an example of our next project here. And I'm doing all of this because my other project over here is just simply drying out. When all of that gloss comes off of and dries off of the violet, we're going to be in business, and I can demonstrate with that one. But this is an example. I have to actually write this up as an assignment and post it today. So it's not in our coursework just yet. But here's the idea. Try to find two great big shapes or create your own two great big shapes of a color complement. So once again, we've got orange as one of the colors chosen and blue as the other color chosen. And the blue is a photograph from the magazines that is a bunch of blueberries. And you would think that they're blue, and one would believe that they're blue, but when you really look at this and examine it, there's actually very little full spectrum intensity blue color in these blueberries because there's lots of neutralized areas of the blueberries where there's a photographic highlight in the middle of the blueberry, making a very white blue area in the photographic highlights. And they're kind of blotchy. So there's neutralized blue. Blue mixed with white becomes somewhat neutralized. And so it's a little bit less full spectrum intensity. But the idea was to take blue, an interesting shape of blue, and orange, creating some kind of interesting shape of orange that were full spectrum intensity. I'd like those two to be the big shapes in your composition. Great big shapes of orange and blue or whatever color complement pair you want to play with. I started off by talking about the demise of certain magazines, fashion magazines, because we don't have them anymore. So I'm thinking that we're just going to use paint to do this, or you can do this, in your computer using Photoshop if you are in the digital design program and you've got the computer tools and Photoshop to do this with. You can do this in Illustrator or Photoshop and create either images that are based on a strong full spectrum intensity color, or you can actually just make the color shapes the same way that we're doing with paint. So we're going to make full color shapes. I like to cut them out and do this as a collage because it's so much easier to shove the shapes around to see what are the best ways that the shapes go together. If you're actually trying to do this as a fixed painting, on your watercolor board or Bristol board, then you don't have any movement to be able to move things around. So as collage elements, as cut out individual shapes, we can move them around, overlap them. And the whole idea of exploring this is we're going to explore the concept of simultaneous contrast. Simultaneous contrast happens when two colors are in direct contact with each other, where they are sharing an edge or they are overlapping so that the colors are coming into direct contact with each other. Simultaneous contrast has a theory, and that is that if you've got a full spectrum intensity color next to its full spectrum intensity complement, that you're going to create a kind of a visual fight that happens between the two colors, and that they will vibrate visually and that they will be difficult to look at because their contrast with each other is so great. And so that's what we want to try to illustrate here with two large shapes of um, color complements. We want to illustrate the concept of simultaneous contrast in the middle of our composition. So play with these as shapes, move them around. When you're satisfied with them, glue them down so that they are overlapping or sharing an edge along a really long edge, so that we get the greatest amount of simultaneous contrast happening between those shapes. Then a secondary thing that we do kind of on the perimeter or on the periphery, on the edge, is take a neutralized version of the color complement, in this case orange. And usually I like to go with a smaller sized shape. And usually I like to do this as some kind of a repetition of form, because that helps hold the composition together when one shape is repeated over and over again, and have them be like a simple geometric shape like rectangles, squares, circles, or triangles, and throw them over on the outside edge of the big shape so that you've got neutralized orange overlapping or sharing an edge with the full spectrum intensity blue, to illustrate the idea that a neutralized version of the color harmonizes much better with the full spectrum intensity complement of that color. So that's what's happening over here. This part of the composition, in theory, is more harmonious than this part of the composition in the center, which is fighting like cats and dogs visually with each other. And when we go over to the other side, the same thing is over here. I've got neutralized versions of blue over here. They were sampled from a magazine, so they were supposed to be neutralized versions of a blue, overlapping the orange, and hopefully creating a more harmonious area of overlapping and simultaneous contrast, because one of the color complement pair is a neutralized version of the color. So we've got colors more harmonious on the outside edges of the composition, especially with smaller shapes in a color complement that is a neutralized version. And we are illustrating in the center with our big shapes simultaneous contrast, bright colors, sharing an edge, fighting like cats and dogs with each other. And it's a fantastic thing. So having said all that, you get to play with whatever shapes that you want them to be. I've still got something drying in the middle of this, so I may not be able to do much with this today, but I'm going to try. I'm going to grab a scissors. I'm looking around my desk right now to see where the hell James put his scissors. And you know what? I'm probably going to have to go look for a scissors so I can cut one out. I'll be right back. All right. Sorry about that. Coming back with the scissors. So my yellow's dry because I did the yellow first. Well, it's for the most part dry. So I've got this big area of yellow, and I'm going to try to do this on camera so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to cut this out, and then I'm going to try to figure out what kind of shape I can make out of it. Because I want to make an interesting shape that's interesting to the viewer, and that might be interesting in a compositional space. So I've got my shape cut out, and I'm going to get rid of this little bit of white on one end. And I might not do anything with this right now, but I would kind of like to make this into something that's sort of like a super shape, like a teardrop, or I don't know, a meteor that's streaking across the sky, something that is sort of, or a bird. Let's make it into a bird. How about that? It's kind of bird shaped right now. So anyway, an interesting shape that isn't just a square or a rectangle or something that's got a little bit more dynamic shape to it. Dynamic shapes kind of happen when you've got interesting angles, like the end of a triangle that tails off in one direction, because that, you know, gives a sense of speed or drama or something like that. Round shapes on another end are kind of organic and can possibly, you know, give some kind of a sense of an organic form, like a life form or an animal or something like that. So right now I've got this thing and it's a Tweety bird, and isn't that beautiful? So I'm going to put the Tweety bird down someplace. I'm going to look at what's going on with my violet, which is still quite wet in the middle, but I'm going to take a chance and cut it out anyway. See what I can do with violet. So come here, violet. We're going to try to cut you out of this thing so we can play with you. Right now it's looking like an eggplant to me. So hooray for my side. I have an eggplant, violet eggplant. I might have to work with that. That's kind of an interesting concept. This one can be a little bit more eggplanty in its kind of shape and appearance, and that would be fine. In fact, I was even thinking about trying to take this one and making it into like a fat lightning bolt, because that would give it lots and lots of energy and, you know, sharp edges and more surface area if I was going to put it over the top of the eggplant. So since it's dry and since I'm waiting for my eggplant to dry, I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to go this direction. I'm going to go this way, and then I'm going to try to do this on camera so you guys can see. I'm going to try to do lightning bolt and see what happens if I can get a lightning bolt going with this thing, because then that gives me lots of geometric shape that I can play with. So I don't know if I'm able to do this on camera. I can't watch you guys and do this at the same time, but I'm trying. So I'm going to go this direction with this, and I'm going to try to make as fat a lightning bolt as I can, as I'm trying to turn the corner here on my lightning bolt. Something like that. Anyway, I've got myself sort of a lightning bolt happening. Hooray for my side. And I might just make this, I'm going to take the curve off of this end to really try to make it into something that's scary and has lots of edges and corners and changes of direction and stuff to give it all kinds of energy. So I've got this energetic yellow form, and I've got this eggplant turd over here. So I've got the energetic lightning bolt and the turd. And so I'm going to try to compose with those two elements in a collage kind of a composition over on a new piece of Bristol board. So I'm going to grab myself a new piece of Bristol, and it's clean, and it's going to be the thing that I'm going to compose on. So now you get to choose whether your composition is going to be a horizontal composition or a vertical composition. Horizontal compositions tend to feel like they are just a little bit more quiet and subtle and all of that stuff. Vertical compositions tend to feel like they're a little bit more energetic. And so what we're going to try to do is place one over the other and see if we can get the maximum amount of color interaction between the two edges. So you can put one right over the top of the other, or you can put it off to the side of the other. I think I'm going to need some of this lightning bolt to be available to me, so that I can put neutralized versions of the violet over on the outside edge of the lightning bolt. I also need one part of the eggplant available to me so I can put neutralized versions of the yellow over there too. So I've still got my neutralized yellow and my neutralized violet, and we're going to have to just try to figure out what we're going to do with those. Any shape will do. The hardest part, I think, for you guys is just to kind of look at these things, you know, and think of them in terms of abstract shapes, because you always want to make an image of some kind. And I want to try to get you guys to maybe not worry so much about image and just play with these as design elements. So let's see, since this eggplant is round and my lightning bolt is is kind of jagged, maybe what I should do to be consistent, because we love consistency, is play with the idea of triangles. And I might use triangles of a neutralized yellow off on one side, because then I'm playing with a shape that also is a shape that's consistent with some of the angular shapes that are happening in the lightning bolt too. So you see I can play with some of the logic of shape, and that can be yet another compositional idea in this. And if I run all of my triangles kind of in a similar direction and sort of parallel to each other, then that makes a much more unifying kind of a statement of secondary shapes out there. If I've got my triangles, if I've done all triangles, but I've got them kind of going every which way, they're holding together less strong. There's less visual linkage between the elements than if I try to really get them all oriented in space so that they're all going a same or similar direction. Now, the designer can make these choices either way they want to, and these are valid choices. If you want more randomness on the outside edge, that's fine, because that would make the middle of your composition even a stronger focal point, because you're kind of really randomizing your outside edge if you do something like this where they're all going cattywampus all over the place. My my violet is still to this minute drying, so I'm going to let it dry. It's also drying, and it's not drying flat. It's starting to curl a little bit. That's going to happen with your shapes, and you're just going to have to glue it down with your glue stick, and that will get it to do its thing. I'm going to choose to get these going sort of in a more uniform orientation in space with each other, so that I get a pattern happening here, creating stronger visual linkages between them. And then they're also, it's not so visually confusing, so that then I can just look at what's happening with a neutralized version of yellow and how it relates to the violet over there. And finally, on the other side, I've got neutralized violet, and I want to come up with some kind of a color shape for the neutralized violet. Sorry, I cut that other stuff off camera off of there. But now I've got this area of neutralized violet. Gosh, if those were all sharp and nasty little triangles, maybe I should make myself like some circles or grapes or something to kind of overlap my lightning bolt on the outside over here. That would be consistent using shape as a compositional element. So now I'm trying to get down to where I've just got neutralized violet here in this thing. And then maybe I'm gonna cut these into, just slice and dice into things that are big enough that I can make circles out of. So I've got, try to find a place where you guys can see this. I've got one of those. Let's see what happens if I just kind of try to make a nasty, not the world's greatest, but sort of, a circle, and throw that circle down there. That circle is a completely different idea than these triangles over here. It's round, it's soft, it contrasts as a shape, as well as contrasts as a color with the lightning bolt. But it's also contrasting as a shape with these triangles over here. But we also want to see how they overlap and what they do in terms of color harmony. How do they harmonize, with the lightning bolt? Are they going to show as much simultaneous contrast? No, they're not going to show as much simultaneous contrast They're going to have a different quality of contrast, and they're going to hopefully harmonize a lot better. And I just think that using a repetition of form on the outside tends again to be it creates shapes that are similar, which creates a repetition of form and kind of a pattern, which then helps the composition start to pull together better. So there's some logic, some design logic that I wanted to kind of start to bring into the idea of these compositions, that if you're going to have two big dramatic shapes that are different from each other in color, it's kind of nice to have the two different shapes also have different qualities in terms of shape, so that they're just not two blobs that are just two different colors, but if they actually are two different colored blobs that are two different shapes, dramatically different kinds of shape, that adds to the simultaneous contrast happening in the middle. And then the secondary, tinier shapes are doing something that doesn't call as much attention to them. It creates more of kind of a secondary thing happening out on the periphery. And it actually does allow for the possibility of um, harmony happening between the bright color and the dull version of its uh, color complement. And so I was looking around for ways of getting these things to overlap in kind of a uniform way. And, but I don't want to take away the lightning bolt quality of the lightning bolt. So I'm covering up right now some of the corners on my lightning bolt. But if I really want that to express itself as a lightning bolt, I might have to come back and move these so that they're overlapping on the flats instead of overlapping on the zigzags, because I really want the lightning bolt to still look like a lightning bolt. I could even possibly overlap these underneath and see what that might look like as overlapping, because that is overlapping. We've got overlapping or a shared edge there. That way the lightning bolt is still solid as a shape. I'm not taking little bites out of the lightning bolt, so that it is solid as a shape. And so that way I can kind of play with the harmonious area of the composition, as well as the full spectrum intensity. Let's see, where is that? That's right up there. I've got two bright highlights on the paint right here. They're reflections, they're highlights. That's not white paint down there. That's the wet paint that is still so wet that it is glossy and reflecting ceiling lights back at you guys. So as I put a shadow over one and a shadow over the other one, you can kind of see that those are catching reflections off of the lights in the ceiling. All right, but that's the next project. I don't even have an assignment for it yet, but if you've already finished all of this color blending that we've been playing with this week, the next thing is going to be this. Exploring what happens with simultaneous contrast. And I want you guys to just do what I did. Take a piece of either watercolor board or Bristol board, whatever you've got, and I like to divide it on a diagonal and make a big color place of one color complement and another big color shape of the other color complement, and make them so big that I can still cut out and kind of construct a shape out of them. And I like them to be a fairly large and maybe long kind of a shape, so that they can share a really long edge possibly. I'm also going to look at what this looks like as a vertical composition with you guys, just in case this makes any more sense to you guys as a vertical composition rather than a horizontal composition. So we'll go both ways with that. We might even go upside down to see what this looks like as an upside down composition, to see if there is even one orientation in space that presents better to the viewer. And maybe it's even more surprising in the way that it accomplishes its goals with just a different orientation in space. So this is going to be the next project. Please feel free to execute this over the weekend if it's something that is of interest to you. Otherwise, we're going to be working on this on Monday. And if I get bored on Monday, I may even um, do a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation with a couple of slides and talk about simultaneous contrast. And then I'm going to go right into the next thing, which is going to be what your authors cover in chapter 7, the idea of triads and triadic color combinations. And we're going to do another one of these, choosing a color triad. So we're going to do one of these using 3 colors also after we do this one. But this one is going to be a piece of artwork that's suitable for framing. You could buy a $10 frame from Walmart across the street and throw this into a frame. And you could give this away as a piece of artwork to somebody, or hang this up in your bathroom, or hang this up in your living room, because these things, become designs and abstract art that is suitable for hanging. So please think in terms of this as something that you care about, that is a simple painting or design that actually illustrates a concept, but also that is pleasant to look at, challenging, interesting to look at, and might be something that you want to keep and even frame and put on your walls. I'm gonna stop talking now, and I'm gonna again open it up to any questions you might have. So if you're thinking of a question or a comment, I'm happy to entertain questions and comments at this point. Watch me just stop talking and take a breath for just a minute. I don't have too much else to do today because I did this very efficiently. Oh, Gabrielle is right there. What's up, Gabby?
I was just curious if it's strictly like you want us to paint and then make these shapes, or if the option to do either painting it with hand or to do digital design in regards to like mashing shapes together.
Um, you do not have to paint this. I mean, you can approach this any one of 3 ways. You can do this with your digital design tools if you have that, and that'd be fantastic. So it does not have to be a collage. Also, if you fancy yourself as a painter and you would like to just paint something that is an image or an abstraction or something, and you don't want to collage it, you want to just accomplish all of this in one painting, please feel free to do this. I'm offering this as a collage technique for those of us who have never painted before and don't know how to take individual elements and move them around, digitally in a digital design. So this gives you a hands-on approach to moving around individual elements and composing with individual elements in a digital design. For instance, all of this felt like it was just shifted over to the right just a little bit. So I have just kind of taken everything and shifted it left a little bit more so that it sits centered in the compositional space, where I've got more of a sense of an equal or an equivalent margin of negative space on the 2 sides, and a fairly equivalent margin of negative space on the top and bottom, so that now I've got good balances right and left, top and bottom, on my diagonals. And so it sits and fits in my compositional space really good. I can achieve that by having individual elements that are loose that I can move around in a compositional space and see how I can get them to best interact with each other. When you start painting this thing on a piece of canvas, you are locked into wherever you're putting your shape elements. So I went way out of my bounds to answer your question, but the short answer is yes, you can do it as a digital design, you can do it as a painting and create an image if you want, or you can do it as a collage where you're actually moving individual, elements around. Because this is the same thing you can do in a digital design. You can click on a shape and you can move it in and out and drag it around and find exactly the right spot to drop it and let go of it in the composition. And those are the best parts of both collaging it with real elements and also doing it, in a digital design. Sorry, that was way too much information. But I bet that helped a lot, didn't it? It clarified it some. All right. Anybody else want to take a chance on asking me a question that I might riff on for 5 minutes? Because that's a fun thing to do for me, because I've had coffee this morning. And in fact, I have just a little coffee left. I hope you have coffee for this project. And so I would pick up the project and show it to you, but it's all in pieces and parts, and it'll just fall apart if I pick it up. So that's our next project. So either work on finishing up this project over the weekend and today, or launch into that next one. That next one took me half an hour to do, so it'll probably take you guys at least an hour to do on your own if you're doing painted and collaged elements. Otherwise, it might take you a couple of hours, as a digital project to play with. So do the best you can, and we'll see where we're at on Monday. Some of you will have it done, and if you do, please be able to screen share it with us so that we can see other approaches to this. And those of you who don't work as fast or need time to mull this over in your head before you do it, you'll be able to see other examples to help jumpstart your own creativity, because inspiration kind of is hard to come by sometimes. So on that happy note, have a good rest of your Friday. I'm not going to take any more questions unless I see a microphone come unmuted. And I hope you guys have a really good week. I've got one eye on the microphones as I reach for the mouse, and I'm going to hit the end button. And we'll see you guys again on Monday morning.